Go.
Well, when I was young, McCain, I lived in Homestead. And you may think of Homestead now, where you down all the stores down there in the waterfront and Sandcastle and the bike trails. But when I was young, there was only one thing in Homestead, and that was steel mills. Pittsburgh used to make more steel than anywhere in the world. In the center of it was the U.S. Steel Homestead Works, which stretched all along the Monongahela River. So my family, like most of the families in Homestead, they worked in the mills. And the mills were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the entire year. So what that meant was Homestead was always alive, because there were people coming and going to work at all times of day and night. So all the stores and all the shops and everything were open because there were always people coming and going. One of my memories is all times of day, relatives coming in and out on their way to work or on their way home from work.
How did they get to work?
Well, it's funny, most people back then didn't have cars, and so they would have to find different ways. A lot of people walked to work, or some would take the trolleys. There were trolleys that ran all through Homestead. When there started to be cars, frequently only one or two people in the neighborhood would have one. So people would jump a ride with someone and go back and forth on different shifts. My grandfather never learned to drive a car. So his whole life he would have either people stopping by and hitting the horn and taking him down to the mills. And so I always remember from my great-grandfather's house, which is where we used to spend all our holidays, you could see the mills from their window. They were on the third floor of an apartment that overlooked a high-level bridge and overlooked, now it's the waterfront, all the stores, but that was the whole OH5 and all the steelworks in there. And if you came over the bridge at night, they would break the hot ingots out of steel, and they would glow red with a little steamer on them as they sat outside and cooled. And that's something I remember from Homestead. When I was about your age, I had to do a project for school, a science project, and I asked my grandfather if he can show me how they made steel. And I went over to his house one day, and we sat around their kitchen table in their little kitchen, and he had tons of envelopes he brought out, and he started opening them, and each one had a different mineral or ore or everything they used in the process of making steel. And he sat down forever and just went through the process and why this was used here and when they put it in and how hot the oven was at that point. And even though I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, that's one of my most vivid memories, because you could see how proud he was and how much important he felt for the role he was in making steel for this country.
How long did you work at the mill?
And actually, when he was young, you had to be 18 to work in the mill, but he lied about his age to get a job. So he started when he was 15 years old, and he worked in the mill for over 50 years. And so it's not something you see too often now, where people stay at one job for 50 years. But he worked there from when he was a teenager, younger than you are now, to all the way to his career, to the end of his career in the steel mills. And although he went there at all times of day and night, and it was hot and dirty work, he loved working with the people, and he loved his job, and he was always proud. And so when we go into Homestead, and you see all the stores and everything down there, when I go to that bridge, I think of the hot ingots, I think of the mills, and I think of my grandfather.